All right, everyone. Welcome in UGA football live with JC Shelton. That's former Georgia tight end Artie Lynch. Back for our G-Day takeaways. Artie, it's a great day in Athens. You couldn't ask for more beautiful weather. Like, if you're in the sun, it's a little warm, but there was a nice breeze. And, dude, it was nice seeing everybody pack the stadium. You know, you're thinking about spring games across the country or more like spring showcases that several teams did. I saw several photos from Alabama compared to this year's and their altered format to what they did last year. And usually for their A-Day game, I think it's called, massively different turnout. They had like 5,000 compared to like 50, something like that. I think it was. So a lot of those is going around, but at least for Georgia, man, the status quo, it felt the same. It was a huge recruiting weekend. There's just tons of recruits there. And I liked how they formatted it a bit. It was a little different, Arthur Lynch, because I'm sitting there and it felt like, 5 minutes of real time was exactly 5 minutes of game time, right? No TV timeouts, barely any timeouts at all. The quarters were short, obviously, man. The halftime was too. So it was really quick, a lot to digest in a short period. But I think we'll get into it today. We'll see if our honest expectations were answered.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, red team, Gunnar Stockton, get the win, 34-17. Now, red team and that first team offense, and even the black team, that second team with Ryan Puglisi at the helm. There wasn't an explosive play until the second quarter. And, a lot of miscues early for both sides. And, we asked why was this? I was asking myself really that entire game, and I was trying to keep up with when the explosives happened because there weren't any. So I noted several, but we talked about the line of scrimmage as one of our points, and what we heard from practice as far as the offensive and defensive line and where they were at. You're missing a couple guys in the offensive line, so I think we should start with that. Really, here's Monroe Freeling, he's a starter, and you got Daniel Calhoun, projected starter. Right, I think he'll be stepping in at guard. And you have defensive line with a lot of questions, but some guys who have been working their way into bigger roles over the last couple of seasons, or maybe they just might be they're coming off their true freshman or redshirt freshman season where they didn't see the field much, so they're getting asked a lot of. But was impressed by both sides, first team, second team defense, and their defensive line. I think they really controlled the line of scrimmage, man, especially early. And I think they were putting the quarterbacks into some situations where they had to get rid of the ball, and maybe they missed their first read. Good coverage in the back end, and that led to some errant throws and some really miscues, and just getting off the field too quickly. Right? Mm-hmm. You look at the third down stats really for both teams, and it wasn't very good. And I think that was a big part of that line of scrimmage play, at least early, man. And Georgia and both sides worked into it. I think as the game progressed, things started to really heat up. I think in the second quarter for these guys, especially Gunnar Stockton. And, all eyes were on the quarterbacks. We can just start there. We'll go through it too. Other than line of scrimmage play, we'll start there.
Yeah, definitely.
Quarterbacks.
Yeah, no, I think it's worth pointing out though, and this is, I always felt that defense has the advantage in the spring, and particularly has the advantage in the scrimmage situation because, we're not. They game plan, but they don't game plan. Like they're just running their install. When I say they, I mean the offense. So it's like, day one, they install X, day two, they install. And by the end, they've installed, a majority of the playbook. But in reality, it's like they're never game planning, right? And so I think what they run is just kind of the bread and butter. And to be fair, the defense too. But I think when the defense kind of knows what to expect from like a play call sheet, it puts the offense at a disadvantage, whether that be ones versus ones, twos versus twos, or threes versus threes. So I think that's why you see a lot of batted balls. I think that's why you see a lot of pressure. And, it's probably why the completion percentage, once we dive into the stats a little bit, is not great from the quarterbacks. But I thought, and again, we'll talk about it here in a sec, but I thought it's worth mentioning that it's a little bit different from an offensive perspective as opposed to a defensive perspective.
Yeah. And Ryan Puglisi took 3 reps for the red team, but he's mostly on the black team. Other than that aspect, went 20 for 46. with the black team. That's at 43.5%, a touchdown. Threw an interception, and he was sacked one time as well. The thing about Ryan, and we were talking about this off air a little bit, there were some times where we were turning to each other in the press box with some big eyes.
Yep.
Because of his arm talent. And I think we expected that just from hearing how he throws in practice, right? But, I mean, that's a good sign. That's an absolute good sign that he not only was he just has a good arm and goes to use it, but he's willing to push it down the field and take some chances. And Kirby Smart talked about this after the game. He was like, and Artie, you just kind of described it, which they're not really game planning here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And he's Kirby Smart said defensively, they weren't showing them anything exotic, crazy pressures, right? They were pressuring here and there, but it wasn't like something that they're holding, in their sleeve for later in the season, like in the fall. And on offense, he was just like, hey, we're going to go prove that we can run, throw, and catch. So they were given a ton. And I think this is big we'll get to receivers here in a minute, but big for the receiver room as well, is just taking chances. Those one-on-one balls that so many times Georgia didn't hit last year when you absolutely needed it, whether it was a drop or an errant pass or what have you, or maybe a sack. They gave those chances for both guys. And that's when Puglisi really stood out. Throwing that rock up there to the contested guys with some good coverage by Ellis Robinson and those folks.
Yeah, I mean, when and that's not abnormal, right? When you have a guy who's got a hot arm, right? They're inclined to take more risks. We'll just say that, right? Because they understand that they've got a unique gift, and it's on the other side of it, right? You often when you see like a more veteran quarterback who's done a lot of, who's played a lot of football and won a lot of games and has accumulated a lot of stats, like sometimes you'll hear their coaches get so frustrated because like, man, I just wish you'd take a shot, right? Or take some risk, or don't be so systemic, or whatever the kind of the phrase is to describe. And typically that's because like they have a good arm, but they don't trust that, arm enough to like rip a 20-yard out, right? Across the field, right? Or what, that's why it was so interesting when Coach Brian Kelly was talking about quarterback. He just had a great rookie season. He won Jaden Daniels, right? Yeah. Jaden like has a great arm, right? But he was so like hesitant to like let it rip. And then, towards like that Heisman year, he just started letting it rip, right? Taking those risks. And I think Gunner's got, obviously a ton of talent as well. But I think when you see a guy like Ryan and he's got that arm, right? Or the Matt Staffords of the world, the Ryan Malletts of the world, like you'll see them do things on a field. You'll be like, well, that's like, he's not really going through reads. He's just like, I'm trusting this thing to rip it. And it's always fun to watch because when it's successful, it's pretty freaking cool, man.
Absolutely. And you just think where he's going to progress even in the next few months, and a fall camp is going to be huge for him as well.
Totally.
So I think I think he's pushing nicely, right? Gunner, and that's what you want in that room, man. You want some competition for Gunner. And Gunner stepped up. Right, he took his hits early through the interception, which awesome play by Daniel Harris. I think from where my view was, it was Noah Thomas in the back of the end zone. But him and Colby Young look so similar as well. I'm going to go back and look at it. But Daniel Harris, one-on-one ball, Gunner Stockton, put a good one on him, right? Just a little bit inside, and Daniel Harris was just all over him in coverage and a great interception early. I love these guys battled, man, the receiver and DB all day. And you win some, lose some on both sides. But I think the receivers, from my standpoint, I think they at least made me more confident coming from last year. And the opportunities they were given, I think they made the most of. And he had some young guys, too, stepping in, man, the freshmen as well. So I really think they helped the quarterbacks at times. And Gunner and Ryan, like we said, they took full advantage of that, man. They were throwing it around. And I think Kirby Smart, at least from what the temperature he was giving after the game was like that was our plan going into it. But before we get back into receivers, because that's a longer winded thing, let's go to edge. Here's the thing with edge, man. I don't know if we've seen enough to know who's going to be maybe the 2 guys, 3 guys that Georgia really leans on at this position. I think at least from the run defense perspective from both teams, I think the black team averaged 3.4 yards per carry. The red 3.6. There wasn't a lot of room there, and you didn't get to see a lot of Nate Frazier either, right? Georgia's wanting to get these younger guys reps. So even like Cass Jones, right? He took less reps in spring, less reps in the GA game. He was talking about it after. It's kind of thing they do. Oscar Delp, less reps, man. He don't really need it as much as these other young tight ends do. Same thing with running backs and such. But still, you had some young talent there in Chauncey Bowens and Bo Walker and Dwight Phillips and those guys. But I think from defensive standpoint, you said they have an advantage. And I think there was here as far as run defense. And you have really, really good linebackers too, Artie, and I'm sure that plays a huge part in all of this. But from the edge position, I think run defense, I think you could be impressed there. But just who's going to be your go-to pass rusher, man? Who's going to be that Jalen Walker and who's going to be that Mykel Williams type of guy? Tyrone Ingram-Dawkins was a big loss as well there too. I'm just not sure. I didn't have a big takeaway from that group, to be honest with you, from what I watched. So I think there's much to be desired. But, it is spring, so it's not a huge thing. And there is a spring transfer portal window coming up here in one day. It's going to open up too, and there's already some talented pass rushers in there. So I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia adds another guy or 2 on this defensive line to make that group just a little bit more better. I think tight end wise, we'll turn to your expertise here, Artie. Ethan Barbour, we heard a ton about through spring practice. Ellis Williams is that 6'7" guy, that imposing man. He's going to be special. Mm-hmm. And Ethan's kind of under the radar a little bit. Man, that's a dang football player, dude.
Yep.
Right? He really impressed me. 3 for 34, I think it was.
9 targets.
Yeah. Dude, they were trying to feed him that rock, and he could play multiple positions. And they even lined up Ellis on the outside like they used to do with Big O. Yep. Right? And I think that works so well when you had it. And I think you're trying to work him into that role while working Ethan maybe into that H-back position that we were talking about earlier that Benjamin Yorsek did, Brock did at times. So there'll be a lot of opportunities, I think, for Ethan. And he's just a dang football player, man. Smooth, dependable, natural catcher of the football. Right, he's not pushing at it, man. He catches it when it's not catching it in his body or anything like that, which Georgia had issues with last year. Go ahead.
No, I mean, you look at it, right? There is a void for playmaking opportunity or playmakers on this football team, particularly pass catchers, right? And you were talking about the edge guys earlier, right? Like it's very hard to evaluate edge guys in a controlled scrimmage, right? Because you need to see like what guys can get in the quarterback's face and get the quarterback, knock the quarterback down, sack, like whatever, like disrupt the quarterback's order of operations. A spring game in a controlled setting is to maximize the reps for the quarterback. So like even if he's going to be sacked, like, hey, read through your progressions, go through it. I say that to say this. When you're a receiver, right, it's as a live rep as you're going to get throughout the season, right? Like it's full contact, right? If you go over the middle and you catch that ball, like they're liable to knock you out, right? Or vice versa, right? Like if you are blocking, you're blocking full speed. If you catch the ball and you lower your shoulder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think when you have 9 targets and 3 catches, 34 yards, right? Like what that tells me is that they see something in Ethan to where they want to get him the football or at least see how he's going to handle himself when he's a targeted asset like that. And it's as live as they can get, right? So he's catching the ball, he's running with it after catch. And I think those are the things that they like to see because they do have a lot of depth at the tight end room, right? And they have some proven guys, which is a lot more than they could say for the receiver room. So they're probably thinking, like, how can we get a strong rotation of these tight ends and how can we maximize their talents? And if it's creating, reintroducing that kind of H-back, slot receiver type tight end who plays a lot of different positions, they've obviously they've had a lot of success as a team doing that with Brock Bowers. And I think that's something that we should look for. But those were as live reps for Ethan as he's going to see, whereas it's a little bit different for an edge rusher or quarterback, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And those young guys like Jaden Riddell got reps. I was hoping to see a little bit more, at least targets for him in this controlled setting. But we didn't get to see that. 1 reception to 15 yards. Lawson Lucky, a healthy Lawson Lucky, which we've rarely seen, is dangerous, man. The way he moves like a receiver. That's apparent just watching him on the field. And I think, dude, Kirby Smart talked about fire, passion, and energy. He's looking for those guys. And I think he said there's like 5, 6 on the roster, on the entire roster. He'd love to see more. He's happy with what he has, but he'd love to see more. Lawson's one of those guys. I bet if we asked, I don't think Kirby would name the guys, but if he were, I would bet money that it'd be Lawson, because just beyond his, ability as a receiver in that position, which is awesome to see, and that's where football is moving. You have more receiving guys at tight end nowadays. But even after the game and talking to him, I don't know if he had drank a Red Bull before going out and talked to us, but man, he was just wide-eyed, like, let's go kind of thing. Like, he's so ready for the season. Ask him about a guy, and he's like, man, he's amazing. He's energetic. He's like, he's tough. I love what he was. I don't know. He was just different than anybody else talking to him, man.
Yeah, man. I just think he loves ball, dude. And I think he's built a little bit different than, that kind of traditional wide tight end. And I think what they like, they obviously like him as a weapon in the passing game. And what that tells me is, okay, we've got Delp. Delp is kind of like this, the older statesman, reliable. Lucky came on last year, right? And now they got this guy Barber. It's like, I really think they see this room as an asset, right? And while there was some improvement, it seems, in the wide receiver room, it's like Georgia has been at its best as a football program when they have multiple tight ends playing at a high level. And I think Lucky's a guy that, is most likely going to be an NFL player one day. But if they can get those, 2 really dynamic playmakers out of the tight end room, like, that changes everything, how you create a game plan, how you ultimately attack defenses. And I think Delp, can't be slept on either, because he's a bigger body. He's more that traditional tight end, if you will. And I think those 3 guys together could do some damage this year.
Let's move on quickly to defense here for just a second. We'll talk about these linebackers. We'll get back to receivers because that's going to be a long one. But no surprise here, man. C.J. Allen, Chris Cole, and Justin Williams, maybe the best players, and I'm talking about K.J. Bolden too, on this defense.
Mm-hmm.
Man, they were everywhere, just everywhere. I mean, led both teams in tackles. C.J. Allen had 3 tackles for loss by himself, and so did Justin Williams. And remember, Justin Williams got less snaps than Chris Cole last year, game snaps in the fall. And, I mean, there wasn't a huge separator between the two. Now, Chris Cole's, I think he was better in coverage, broke up one in the end zone, looked like a DB back there. And we talked about that's not necessarily his strong suit, but he's just so athletically gifted to do that and be that guy in coverage when you need him and be multiple. And, Georgia loves multiple in their defense. They move their safeties all around, linebackers all around, if you have the talent enough and maybe the physical ability to run with these receivers. And I think he does. Love that for them on defense, and Glenn Schumann and co. and what they can do with them. But C.J. Allen, man, those are all SEC guys right there.
I agree.
And that's when I said earlier when I was talking about the edge room and the run defense, how much these linebackers play a part in that. Because if you can skirt by without having maybe pass rush centric edge guys and have guys like these linebackers who can rush off the edge at times and get in the backfield with all these tackles for loss, maybe you could be okay with that, right? And not just be okay, be really good is what I mean, because you want to be really good, obviously. But maybe you can make up for that with that aspect. Just use these linebackers, man, because they jump off, man. They jump off the field. Jonel Aguero, we talked about him, wasn't healthy than last year, missed a lot of game time and reps and practice as well. He has some weight on his shoulders this year. Georgia needs to step up. I thought he played well. And the few times I did see maybe some pressure was Jonel off in different areas. And he came down with some passion, and he made some tackles from that space as well. Raylan Wilson, another name that we've talked about a lot. Man, he played well. Just the whole entire linebacker room. Terrell Foster was all over the field. He's a linebacker we rarely talk about because of the big name 5-star guys, and like a guy like CJ Allen, who's kind of the captain of that group. Terrell Foster impressed me as well. Secondary wise, Daniel Harris, Ellis Robinson, man, they got beat at times. They had really good plays at times. I thought Ellis was impressive. His pass coverage skills, ball skills are what separate him. Being in the right spot is his challenge. Daniel Harris, in the right spot more than not. And he made some plays. And that interception we already talked about. Excited for him. Obviously, run defense is it's what held him back a little bit last year at times and whiffing on some tackles. Didn't see much of that, dude. Excited for him. And I think him and Ellis pushing each other for that second spot is just going to make that entire room better, because you're not going to have a huge drop off, I don't think, when Ellis comes in for Daniel, because I think he'll get the start.
Just a shout out on Jonel Aguero. He's a Massachusetts guy.
Hey,
St. John's Prep, man, represent. Hey, he went to IMG for a year, but he's a Mass guy.
Yeah, all the 5-stars, take that little 1-year trip to the old IMG in Bradenton, Florida.
They pay homage and kiss the ring to the IMG folk. But anyway, I had to throw that out there.
No, absolutely, man. We like shout outs. Let's hit the receivers, and we'll hit Nico and wrap it up. Probably my favorite part of the scrimmage, and that's when I kind of left it. We already mentioned a few things here, but like I said, a ton of one-on-one balls and Georgia giving opportunities to see what these guys are made of against some really good coverage corners and Robinson and Daniel Harris and co. They made a lot of plays, man. They did. Like I said, it took a while for really both offenses just to get in rhythm, and these quarterbacks to get in rhythm. And it's a kind of an odd setting, right? With the modified format of what you think is a game, but it's really just a modified scrimmage. But Georgia, on purpose, gave them these opportunities. They made a lot of them. Missed some, sure, man, but there weren't many drops. There's only one in my mind that I can remember. Like I said, it was a fast-paced game. It wasn't on TV. We can't review it. But one that I remembered was this Kobe White, but he had a good day anyway. But just went through his hands. But that's what you wanted to see, the improvement, just the basic improvement. Can these guys make the catches that are there? Start with Dylan Bell. He's the elder statesman of this group. He played so well. He's like a multiple, and it's where the NFL is even going. You think of guys like Deebo Samuel in the college game. You're seeing that a lot as well. Dylan Bell took snaps at running backs for a couple of seasons for Georgia. He got snaps there during this game. Receiving wise, 5 receptions, 78, long of 49. It's good to see him get down the field more, because most of the time you see him in those intermediate areas. But when he did get down the field, he made the play and going to punt it on him. But London Humphreys looks different, right? He comes in, he transfers to Georgia late, kind of thrusted into the fire with some suspensions by Georgia receivers and some injuries and such. He made some big catches last year, but he wasn't consistent. And he went 4 for 77, that long of 50. Like he was that track guy that Georgia signed. He's that 4.4, maybe high 4.3 guy. 2 touchdowns, and Georgia using him on those shovel passes as one of his touchdowns. He just beats you to the edge because he's so quick. That's a big weapon. So Kobe White, like I just mentioned, he had that drop, but that's not the big thing for him. The big thing for him was just making plays as a really young kid, right? Coming off a true freshman season where I don't know how many snaps he got, but there weren't a lot off the top of my head. 5 for 67 with a touchdown. And thanks to, I will say, he did get some help by Gunner here and just a perfect drop in the bucket pass in the end zone, which Gunnar had a couple of those. And that's what I was really impressed with, his command and his deep ball touch here. Didn't see a lot of Noah Thomas. He had an injury, but when he was on the field, just towering guy. I would love to see him with some more one-on-one opportunities, but I think he's got an ankle. I don't think it's serious, but he's got an ankle. Colby Young, very impressive. We saw it last year, and it's kind of like Noah Thomas as far as that red zone threat, that third down threat, but he's going to get a lot more snaps than third down this year, man, a lot more. Can he be that X that you need? And blocking is a big part of that Georgia loves at the X. That's why they loved Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. Colby Young has certainly the body to do it. He's massive. He's like a tight end out there. And then CJ Wiley, the freshmen already have so much weight on their shoulders, really, because Georgia needs more depth there, and not just depth to be waiting in the wings, depth to come in there and rotate in and make some plays. And CJ Wiley probably had the best day of all these guys, and really just the speed downfield too. He's a bigger kid. 2 receptions, 47, had that long of 35. Talon Taylor's that 5-star, right? His first since George Pickens, 3 for 32, that long of 17. Impressed with those guys. They stepped up and made some plays against some really talented DBs. And then Jeremy Bell, man. Jeremy Bell's that preferred walk-on, who's a multiple sport athlete. Talent as far as athleticism, off the charts. We heard about him making some plays in the spring, and sure enough, he runs right by a DB and catches a 31-yarder, and that was that other Gunnar Stockton just dropping the bucket. Or might have been publicly, but anyway, dropping the bucket type of pass.
And look, you mentioned Jeremy Bell, right? 6 foot 175, walk-on, multiple athlete, right? There's been many walk-ons at Georgia, and again, we're not talking like turning AJ Green, right? But like Rhett McGowan was a guy that he fielded. We had so many talented punt returners who just could, not to knock Rhett, but like fast guys. When if they got the ball in their hands, they were dangerous, right? Reggie Davis was who ended up being a punt return guy eventually, but Rhett was just one of these guys like sure-handed, tough, athletic enough, right? Like basketball player in high school, track guy in the spring, and 6 foot, 6'1", just like, long hair, a bit of a wild guy, but was reliable, made always made tough catches. And I'm not saying that you need, that the walk-on is going to be the premier receiver, but what I'm saying is if there's opportunity for folks to make plays and they start making plays, like I know for a fact, Mike Bobo and Kirby Smart do not care if it's a walk-on or if it's a 5-star, right? They just want guys who will make plays when their number is called. So, again, no idea what's going to happen, but I think it's going to be a wide receiver by committee for the foreseeable future. I actually like London Humphreys. I was a little bit let down on his year last year. I know there was a number of different factors, but you and I had the discussion when he ultimately came and transferred from Vanderbilt. I was like, I think this kid could be pretty good. He's still got some time to show us what he's got. And I think, there's a lot of different folks on this roster from a wide receiver perspective who I think have an opportunity to carve out a serious role in the fall. Would I love to see one guy be the guy, right? The showstopper, sure, but
draw some double teams, man. Draw some blanket coverages. Yeah, be the guy.
Totally. But we'll see where it goes. But man, don't be surprised if you start seeing particularly if earlier in the year you take a lot of the more the household recruit names, get some reps and maybe not execute or convert when their number's called. All of a sudden you start seeing these other guys who don't get as many opportunities in practice, but when they do get their opportunity or their number is called, they're making plays. And I think people need to realize that too, is the higher recruit that you are, the more looks you're going to get early on. That's just how it is. It's the same concept as when you go to the NFL. If you're a first round pick, you're going to get more reps early on, but eventually the further away you get from being that 5-star freshman recruit or that first round pick, you're either going to make plays and your role is going to increase, or you're not going to make plays. And I guess in this case, you either transfer or you stay, you graduate, and you never kind of like live up to the hype of whatever rating, which is all arbitrary anyway. Like they're not, I don't know how much these ratings matter, but I think that's very important to like note, right? Like not everyone gets the same amount of opportunity early on, but if you see a guy like Dylan Bell as a perfect example, three-star recruit when he started here, like that dude just made plays, and he carved out a position for himself on the football team to do a lot of different things well, and now he's a kind of a premier playmaker for us, I would say.
Yeah, and I know we got a time block here, so we need to get through. So I'll mention these quickly. I want to mention a couple of running backs here. We heard a lot about Bo Walker in the spring. I think he, 5.5 average, one of the best in the entire game, had a long of 30. That was the longest rush of the game. Impressed by him. Downhill guy. He's that shorter stature, 5'8", 5'9", dude. Filled out, just an absolute rock, right? And he's so hard to tackle. And it's short area quickness, man, really impressive. And you can tell that just by watching him run. There's some tailbacks that just have that, man, and he's one of those guys. Sporting that number 24 reminds you of a dude who used to wear 24, shorter guy, north and south, and popped up within a half a second every time he got tackled, and that's no Sean Marino.
The legend.
But and another guy in Chauncey Bowens, overlooked, I think. Redshirt freshman going into it. One of the best players on the field, I think, of the day as far as offensively. He had 5 for 38, long of 12, 7.6 average. He caught one for 14. Fast, very fast kid. I love to see him work into this rotation. And Nate Frazier needs some help here. And I don't know if Georgia's going to add one out of the spring. There's a really good running back out of Cal, Jay Knott, who just entered the transfer portal. If there's any guy Georgia's going to get, it might be him. But, Georgia and NIL and transfer portal, they do things a little bit differently than everybody else. So I think it's hard to predict. But then last but not least, and we'll save it for last, but Zachariah Branch. Now, he lined up with Dylan Bell, and I think this is going to be like the first team kickoff. Lined up with Dylan Bell in the back, and he caught every return for most of the game there with Dylan. Now, in this set spring scrimmage here, Artie, they don't do it live, right? So he's just basically kind of running through the motions, and they blow it dead. He was kind of jogging at points, but one of these kickoffs, he just absolutely skirted KJ Bolden coming down and just juked him out of his socks. And it was amazing to see how jockey he could look. And then all of a sudden, he is quick twitch and just full speed ahead for maybe a yard, but it's a kickoff because he knows it's going to get called dead. So he doesn't keep going. But there's some players that you see on the field that just look different than everybody else as far as that fast twitch and just straight speed. And he's one of those guys. Now, several reps as a receiver, not a lot, but as far as targets, but the one he did make, one of the best catches of the day, contested, put Georgia on the 1 yard line. I can't remember what the guy he called it over was. Like I said, so fast paced, and we don't get to review it, but just an awesome catch 1-on-1. And that was his thing. All right, he's a speed guy. Can he be a dependable receiver and catch some 1-on-1s when you need him to? And so that was promising. But he is that speed guy, man. And keeping him healthy, I think he's an absolute weapon. He could be that guy to draw the double team or to draw the blanket coverage and open up some things for everybody else. So I was impressed with him. I think we expected to be, but I was impressed with him, and especially as a returner, man. Give him some live reps in the fall. Give him some opportunities. I think we might see one taken to the house. But Artie, I know you got to go soon, so we'll wrap it up as far as our DJ takeaways there. Let's talk Nico at Tennessee. Artie, for as long as you can here. I'll just start it with you, man. So I'll give you some preface here. So his team reportedly, and these are multiple reports, had been in contact with Tennessee about more NIL money for months now. So it wasn't just a last week thing before he ultimately didn't show up to practice and Tennessee cut ties with him. It's been multiple months of him attempting to gain more NIL money. And then also reportedly, he had been shopping himself to other teams. Already just went out on us.
No, I'm right here.
There
Sorry.
he is. He had been shopping himself to multiple teams. I heard Oregon. I heard Miami. Obviously, Miami got Carson Beck. Oregon, apparently, Dan Lanning approached Josh Heupel and said, hey, this is going on, by the way. Like, his team's reaching out to us, seeing if we'd be interested. And Nico's one of the guys that he was the first high school dude to just get this massive NIL contract.
Mm-hmm.
$8 million over 4 years with a possibility of a $10 million with incentives. Right. And you think about how he played last year. Already, I know he went to their first CFP and program history, but it wasn't really on necessarily the back of him. They had the SEC's top rushing offense and a dang good defense. He didn't wow you most of the season. He had his moments, but oftentimes he was pretty average.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And he's trying to gain that NIL money like he is one of the top guys in the country. And it's a precedent, man. We haven't seen a holdout like this before. And I don't think it's going to be the last.
Yeah. So, look, I think, Keith Marshall says he was kind of defending Nico on Twitter yesterday. And I love it. And Keith's a very smart guy. And I hear what he's saying. He was talking about, a top tier quarterback or just, an SEC quarterback, starting quarterback. If this were run like a business based off the top line revenue that these teams bring in, if there's 50%, revenue sharing, this is what they would make. And he's not wrong, right? But what his argument fails to realize and adhere to is these kids are not employees, right? And the reason why they're not employees is, it goes two separate ways, right? Obviously, the NCAA doesn't want to give them employee, status because that would allow them to unionize. And then with unions comes collective bargaining, and collective bargaining comes, life insurance, health insurance, additional benefits, and a number of different things. And I do think that's where this will ultimately go. Not for every single college football program in the country, but, a top tier 60 team, 70 team thing, which will be kind of like a super league. And then within the super league, you'll have divisions, and those divisions will be the conferences as they are today. I've said that many times. I think that's where it's going to go. But the fact is that's not the case. And so what you have is this wild, wild west. These guys are independent contractors. They're not W-2 employees, right? So I'm sure they all file 1099 or they have an LLC in their name, and that's how they pay the taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And, I'm not mad at him for trying to get as much money as he possibly can. But at the same time, I don't feel bad for you, dude. Like, you went out there, you tested the market, and you overplayed your hand. And now I could stand corrected, right? Some team might go and give him $4 million, $5 million, $6 million, right? But if USC gives him $4 million or $5, whatever it is, or a team that is not as well positioned as Tennessee is as a program right now, and he gets his $4 million, $5 million, but he does not ultimately, this is a great thing about football, he does not ultimately, have the season that those fans and that program wants him to have. And then ultimately what he wants to have, he goes from a potential first round pick if he stays at Tennessee for 3 years to a third round pick, to a fifth round pick, to an undrafted pick, right? And, that's a loss on personal investment for him of like $30 million, right? Because if he just stays here and he gets his maximizes his $10 million over 3 years, and then he's a first round pick because Heupel, to his credit, develops quarterbacks at a very high level. That's $10 million in the front end, and then a $30 to $40 million in the back end. Mm-hmm. And I think that's everyone's saying it's a college football tipping point. I don't actually believe that. I think the college football tipping point is going to be the employee contracts, which we discussed. And I think there's going to be something that's much more dark. When I say dark, but like drastic. Not
when you say tipping point, can you just like quickly give me a breakdown? Like, what do you mean tipping point? You mean like a major shifting moment?
And I don't people like. I think there are people saying, well, these major college football coaches are coming together and kind of working together to kind of be like, hey, like this is a bridge too far.
I don't know about working together.
Really? Because I mean, you have Oregon that the head coach there calls another head coach. Like if this were real college football and ruthlessness, what's his name would be at Oregon right now. Miami comes out and makes the same statement, right? Our guys are not going to have this. We're not going to tolerate this, essentially.
Well, I think you have certain relationships that might be really developed between coaches, and maybe you know each other's situations to where Oregon. I mean, you got some talent in that quarterback room. I don't think they're really move on.
JC, I think maybe. I think these guys would sell their wife into slavery if it meant they could win a national championship, because it's all about these guys are ruthlessly competitive, but what they're probably saying is like, hey, like this is insane. Like let's try to get out in front of this. Those guys would not be saying what they're saying if they didn't think that they had some sort of like united front in what they were trying to project, right? I don't think every college is going to adhere to that, right? But I also don't think this is the tipping point we're going to see drastic change.
Ladies and gentlemen, we lost Artie Lynch there. He was fired up. It just dropped him. We'll finish it out there. We were wrapping up anyway. But yeah, the Nico situation at Tennessee, is it a tipping point? I think we'll find out soon as the spring transfer portal window opens on Wednesday. Very unpredictable time, right? You don't know how many you're going to lose for Georgia or even across the country for every program, or how many you might gain, because there's also some contributors in the transfer portal right now who I think could make a difference for Georgia. So just keeping tabs with that. UGA Football Live, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're here. We'll cover it. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.